Alright, Oliver! Yay! She's super awesome! I'm going to be talking about poetic identity, mainly. But to start out, we all have been gotten used to the biographies kind of in the front of the poems that we're reading of the different kind of poets. So I thought that since we read her last night and didn't really have much information, that I'd give a little bit of background on Oliver. This is just basic of what you have written on your sheet. She was born in Ohio in 1935. Her father was a social studies teacher in Cleveland. Pretty snazzy. She began writing poetry, I think it was 17. I don't know. Yeah, I might have read that wrong. Something. Yeah, 17. Around the time of 17. She attended 2 universities, but she actually didn't get a degree or graduate from either of them. So she's not an English major of any sort. She might have been while in school, but she's not official. In the late 1950s, she moved to Provincetown, Massachusetts with her partner, Molly Cook. And just of all her collections, she's got a different abundance. She was able to win the American Primitive.
That's the name of her book.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah, she won the Pulitzer Prize for the American Primitive. That's what it is. And then for her new and selected poems, she won the National Book Award. So just kind of knowing her background, she grew up in Ohio and moved to New England, kind of the Massachusetts area, and so a lot of her poems were actually just inspired, most of them actually are inspired by the nature and walks that she took around her home in both places. A lot of her inspiration is from Whitman and Thoreau. She would make observations going on long walks and would just kind of meander around and just really try and embrace what it is. But she also took some pointers from Emily Dickinson, where she really liked being alone and in solitude during these times, and would just kind of have some inner monologues with herself. Just one kind of funny, interesting fact: she was walking along once on her wetland path, because she would just go on long, long walks, and she always has her notebook, but she found herself without a pencil. So she began hiding pencils and pens in trees all around. She would just hide them everywhere in different kind of trees and stuff. And I think I still have one. Yeah, there's still one in my pocket. So she was always getting inspiration every time she went on a walk. It could just be something similar, or that she'd already written about, or something completely new, but she never wanted to be without a writing tool again. So yeah, Whitman, Thoreau, Emily Dickinson with her long walks alone for inspiration. But she has been criticized. I found that she was criticized for too closely comparing women and nature. So in a couple of her poems, like the one that Brother Stewart read today, The Meeting, when you're thinking it's a woman and a horse and they're the same thing, actually I didn't understand that because I didn't realize it was a horse. But yeah, I just took it as meaning woman, nature, earth kind of thing, and just kind of working along with nature and just putting her own feelings and emotions to what is around her as she went on her walks. So kind of going into the discussions, just the first one: how does the house compare to writings of Emily Dickinson? If we want to turn to that, I think that's the first one we read, 244. I don't know if anyone wants to just kind of read or just skim some spots.
Let's read it aloud. That's okay.
All right, we'll read it aloud, maybe.
Oh, wait.
Yeah, it's everyone's turn.
Because we lived our several lives caught up within the spells of love, because we always had to run through the enormous yards of day to do all that we hoped to do, we did not hear beneath our lives the old walls falling out of true, foundations shifting in the dark. When seedlings blossomed in the eaves, when branches scratched upon the door, and rain came splashing through the halls, we made our minor brief repairs, and sang upon the crumbling stairs, and danced upon the sodden floors. For years we lived at peace, until the rooms themselves began to blend, with time and empty one by one, at which we knew, with muted hearts, that nothing further could be done, and so rose up and went away, inheritors of breath and love, bound to that final black estate no child can mend or trade away.
Yeah. And so, kind of just my personal opinions on it. A lot of Dickinson was kind of like dark introspection and like joyous release, and just kind of going into this dark, kind of haunting place, but also finding like ways to bring light into it, and just in certain spots, just with inheritors of breath and love, bound to that final black estate. Like they have this breath and love, but they're stuck in this like dark, like kind of hard time. And I don't know if anyone else like has any comments, thinking like there's any comparisons, or if you think it doesn't compare to Emily Dickinson at all, like criticisms, thinking that I'm just crazy. Yes, no, maybe so. Okay.
Sorry, I was writing. I
Oh
did
no,
have
it's
a thought,
okay.
but
You were
like, I
having
couldn't raise
notes,
my
like
hand.
sure.
I like the meter and the rhythm of it is very similar. Like just right away, because we lived our several lives caught up within the spells of love. Like it's very on beat, and that's something that Emily Dickinson does a lot because it just sets this tone for the poem. And sometimes they match, and sometimes they don't. And I think that she played that very well. So.
Yeah, just kind of like the moving along, and keeping a beat, so the reader's not like getting distracted by different kind of things, and just kind of continuing through the poem, but also understanding the symbolism.
I think something that is kind of similar to some of Emily Dickinson's poems is Emily Dickinson used to write like kind of cheerful poems that were kind of like depressing a little bit, which is kind of what I feel this is. Like it's got a nice little da 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 to it, and it's kind of musical and cheerful, but it's talking about a house that represents something, which, you know, it's not totally clear. I guess love, I guess is what the house would be, is like literally falling apart around them. And they're making little repairs, but kind of just singing along. Like, it's very, like, they're being very frivolous about the fact that something is falling apart in front of them. So I think that that kind of theme in writing is kind of similar to some of Emily Dickinson's poems.
Yeah, like this destruction or despair around you is like kind of almost just like a background noise to actually what's trying to be there of like hope and just love. Alright, so moving away from Dickinson.
Wait, not yet. So I mean,
Not
yeah,
yet?
this
Okay,
no.
sure.
No, I think
Like,
this
you
poem's
have
interesting.
notes? Yeah.
Because what's going on here? She's talking about you're caught up in life and love and everything you're doing, so you don't notice the entropy, right? Things falling apart underneath your feet, around you, all of this. This house, it's emblematic of that, right? It's like a house falling down. This is our lives here. Interesting use of metaphor here. You know, you make a brief repair and you sing, but the stairs are still crumbling, the floors are still sodden. You keep going until, like it says here, you inherit, you know, or that nothing further could be done, and so rose up and went away, inheritors of breath. Bound to that final black estate would be death, right? No child can mend or trade away. So ultimately, we go through our lives, but everything's kind of crumbling around us, but we still have our spells of love. We live our lives, and then we'll die because we can't get out of it, right? So notice the image of death here compared to, she writes about death a lot, okay? Amazing how somebody who writes so much about death can be so just ecstatic and alive, and I mean, there's probably no accident there, but pay attention to what she says about death here. Also, I mean, on this poem, while we're still here, this one's interesting because we do have the regular meter, right? The iambic meter there. This does not sound at all like Mary Oliver. Okay, and very few of her poems here, you know, we get into the next book even, and we're not seeing that. She's got a very different rhythm. Try and pay attention to the organic kind of natural rhythm she creates as she becomes more mature as a poet, which is one reason I want you to read this poem first, you know, get into these ones first, and then get to the later ones later on, which are more where she's found her groove.
Yeah, this is from her early life, so it's probably that she was reading a lot of Emily Dickinson, was taking that inspiration, and like it was Birchfield, but like just inspiration is like basically copying, and like you're writing, and no writing is you write what you read kind of thing. And so it was probably a lot of Emily Dickinson that like she was reading and taking into account when she was walking along and just kind of living her life. Alright, so kind of moving into a little further on in her life, we're going to go to Sleeping in the Forest. I don't remember what page that's on.
181.
Oh, thank you. That's right. Alright, and this is kind of with the criticisms of her poetry too closely related to females in nature. Just kind of wondering if you read. It's kind of short, so I mean, anyone want to read it? I can read it. Want to read it? Alright, sure.
I thought the earth remembered me. She took me back so tenderly, arranging her dark skirts, her pockets full of lichens and seeds. I slept as never before, a stone on the riverbed, nothing between me and the white fire of the stars but my thoughts. And they floated light as moths among the branches of the perfect trees. All night I heard the small kingdoms breathing around me, the insects and the birds who do their work in the darkness. All night I rose and fell, as if in water, grappling with a luminous doom. By morning I had vanished at least a dozen times into something better.
Yeah, so this one quite literally just compares Earth to women, just like the arranging of her dark skirts, just like the ground, the soil, the earth, full of lichens and seeds, things that grow and kind of just come to fruition throughout the life of the earth, and just kind of like with a woman, in my own opinion, was just like women are full of life and they can give life and that kind of thing, just as the earth gives life to flowers and trees and plants and even humans, and just how a mother would like give life to a child and that sort of thing. Do you agree with the criticisms of that, like it's too much of a relation between nature and females, or is it just enough, or is it too little? Just any kind of thought.
Do you know why people had a problem with her
I couldn't
comparing
find it.
females to nature?
I think it might have just been that, just like, maybe it just appears a lot in her later poems even. I'm not quite sure, but just, it was something that I found that like she could, like, people were just like, there's criticisms that she just does this a lot, and it's just like way too closely like just pinpointing females in nature.
I think it's perfectly okay, honestly. Maybe I'm just a woman and I like being compared to nature. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day, right? Women are compared to nature all the time. America was a woman. They always referred to her as a woman. Like,
There are far worse things to be compared
yeah,
to.
right?
Yeah, nature's
And
something that's
Mother
beautiful.
Nature, and that's not a new concept to me. I have a hard time understanding why they would care if she's comparing nature to a woman.
Yeah, it was just something interesting that I had found, and I just couldn't find like more depth into it. So I don't know if like you guys had any thoughts about like if it is a criticism or if it's just something normal that like, people just twist it.
I'm curious to know, were you able to find who was criticizing, or just like, was it mostly men or mostly even women? Because, I don't know, I'd be curious to see who is having a problem with it.
It would be. I couldn't find much.
Well, you know, I mean, if a man compares nature to a woman,
That's
or a
true.
woman to nature, is that a problem? Isn't that more problematic?
I think that's more like beauty. Like if a
Yeah,
man
well,
compares
I
a
mean,
a
there's
woman
also-
to nature,
a dead
it's
tree and get off of it.
well, yeah, but like if a man compares a woman to nature, like Shakespeare, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's like him giving her a compliment, kind of. And I guess if it's a woman comparing women to nature, it's almost maybe just like seen as prideful, or just kind of thinking of yourself more than what you are.
So nature's like really complicated. Like it can be very peaceful and it can be very harsh. It can be very still. It can be very powerful. So like, I guess, I don't know. I guess some sensitive people might think that she was calling women complicated, but like, I don't know. As a woman, I am complicated. Like we're crazy complicated. So like, I don't have a problem being compared to something that's so like it's just not concrete. There's so much ebb and flow, like there's so much change and yeah.
Nature's out there to be tamed, to be conquered. You know, the man in nature is putting his dominance over everything he sees, right? I mean,
Maybe, yeah.
I want to hear the guy's point of view on all
know.
this.
Right
Yeah,
there.
I think
Trash.
So I think the only way that this criticism could make sense is if she only compared nature to women, or if every time that she brought up nature in her poems, that she also referred to women. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I could see that could be a problem. Like if I write 300 poems and all of them are about nature and all of them are about women, yeah, like think of something different, think of something new, try something else. But I feel like that'd be the only thing, or if the comparisons are too much about women and not enough about nature. I didn't find that personally, but I feel like those are the only viable ideas of why people would. I'm okay with women being compared to nature. It makes sense to me. I don't know if that's cultural or how I was born, so yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the poem, and I found that like the comparison was actually pretty significant. And in her other poems, that like some of them, yeah, you can see kind of more of a female voice in them. So I don't know if like that's what they were talking about. Like the female voice was just very present, but I mean, she is female.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the thing. That's where she is.
I'm trying to think of reasons why this would be a problem. I mean, is it exclusive of men? Is it, single track thinking? Or is it, when you equate a woman with nature, are you limiting how a woman can or should be seen? Again, women are just these natural entities that are beautiful and meant to be appreciated, but they're not civilized. I don't know. I'm trying to think of what it could possibly be. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not familiar with the criticism
It was
myself.
just like on a website, and just like, and I was looking up stuff about her, and there was like one criticism is that she too closely relates females to nature, and I just thought that would be an interesting thing to kind of like dive into and see, like, hear what we thought and just kind of where we were going. And just for the final question, now that you know that like she kind of like grew up in like Ohio and like Massachusetts, kind of like more wetland areas, does that have just and like her any effect on what you would like on the tones of the poem that you found, like just that it was like flat and dry or wet and all these other kind of things, what you know of Ohio and Massachusetts, like if it changes the tones of any of these poems? Yeah.
I would say yes, because I serve my mission in Phoenix, and if you're comparing women to the desert, that would, be a very different feeling than if you use them in wetlands. Like, the tone of, I don't know, and I grew up in Maryland, so those are like, those biomes, I guess you call it, are totally different. And I think the feeling of the people that live in the places are totally different too. Like, there are people living in Phoenix still who started living there before there was air conditioning, and like, like their mindset is very different. So I think the tone would have to match that that sort of life-giving, green area that she grew up in.
Yeah, not just like the dry crushing of different areas and spaces, but more of just the beauty and life-giving, kind of just like with sleeping in the forest or with the meeting and stuff. And then just that the earth is full of life, and so then just walking through it, just seeing all of it teeming there. Any other comments? Maybe?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
awesome.
Strike.
I think something that's interesting is also, location is important. Also, on the side of the United States it's at. Because there's always like a different feel from something that's on the East Coast or in the Central than when it's from the West Coast. It's like got its own vibrance and different feel. Like, for example, the comparison with the wetlands and nature and forest is a lot different than, per se, something in California, where you could be either in a mountainous, snowy area like in Shasta, or in the beach coastal life in Santa Cruz or stuff like that. It really just has its own vibe and difference that builds off of that.
Yeah, I
I'll get to you in just a sec. Just for me personally, I grew up in Washington, and so it's like totally wetlands, and like where I lived just in the middle of the woods, and like you just go out and the grass is always like covered in dew, and the trees are always green, it's the evergreen state and stuff, and so it was very different, and like I can understand like that some of the poems were really visual to me because I can picture like my own living circumstances back home that I grew up with, and then versus here where it's very dry and it's flat, there's not a lot of mountains and it's kind of gray or sometimes, and like even just the weather right now, it was very like the tones, if it was like in my own life, Washington versus Rexford, and I could just see the differences between that.
I was just thinking, like, even like urban versus rural would have a lot to do on just how she wrote, not even what she wrote about. Like, if you read things that are written for, like I did Langston Hughes for the close reading, and Langston Hughes grew up in an urban area. There's a lot, very metropolitan, lots of concrete and buildings and sharp edges and corners, and his poetry is a little more like bam, 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 whereas hers kind of flows more because she grew up in nature. So I think that that may play an equal role between the type of landscape, also like rural versus urban.
Yeah, her poems had like a sense of peace and just free flowing about them, even though they were structured in a way and weren't just like free verse and just kind of out there. They did have like the sense of like flowing and just movement in them rather than just hitting it like really hard and really fast. So yeah, that's a really cool point.
You have up to 30 more seconds if you need them, because I want to get into one more poem
I
here.
don't think I need them. I think I'm done. Thank you guys for your comments.